We are here with legendary business reporter Steve Lohr from the New York Times, over 20 years. Also the author of Data-ism, a great new book here that's the revolution transforming decision-making, consumer behavior, and almost everything else, including health and healthcare, which I want to get into with you. But let's start with Data-ism. It's really a philosophy that you talk about, the philosophy on how decisions should be made. What is it, and why did you write this book?
I've been writing about these kinds of things long before terms like data science and big data and data-ism surfaced. And this book was an extension, actually, of a Sunday review piece that I was asked to do by a senior editor at the New York Times, who had been to Davos and had a lot of these big data sessions, and said, well, you've been writing about this kind of stuff because you do a general interest piece. And he said, and we did it the old-fashioned way. He said, here's the headline, you figure out the story. And the headline was The Age of Big Data. And so I did a long kind of explanatory piece, and led to a book contract, and I signed it, and a year later they actually still did want it. So I took.
It's always a good sign.
So I took 10 months off from the New York Times and worked out of a little cubbyhole at Columbia University, where I went to school years ago, and traveled around and did the book. I did additional reporting in this, and then wrote it as well.
It's interesting. You talk about that in the book, about how data science is really discovering the issue through the data. That's kind of how you discovered the book, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it's one thing leads to another kind of thing. But I mean, to answer your original question as to what data-ism is, it's really the sort of the broadest decision-making implication of this technology that we now call either big data, data science, or data-driven artificial intelligence. And it's, you move kind of through three stages. There's the technology, which is all the data we know about from various sources, right? Unstructured, structured, and unstructured. The tools from the artificial intelligence toolkit, mainly machine learning, to see patterns and perhaps predict what's next. And then it opens the door to kind of a revolution in measurement. I mean, you can see things in a way you never could before. I mean, there's a little lead anecdote in a vignette that kind of starts the book about McKesson pharmaceutical distribution, right? And they took, this is a massive undertaking, right? And I went down to their big national distribution center outside Memphis, and that's 8 football fields, and this is a razor-thin margin business, right? And so they've been at this for a long time, but they were able, through sensors and smart software, to be able to take $1 billion out of their distribution network. And Don Walker, the guy who was the senior executive in charge of all that, has a nice phrase for it. He said, what the technology allows you to do is to make the invisible visible. Mm-hmm. And that's, so you can see and measure things as you couldn't before. And then the idea is that more and more decisions can be made based on, data and analysis, as opposed to gut feel, experience, and intuition. And a lot of that's good, and some of it can go too far.
So I want to get into that part, but what should entrepreneurs, CEOs, leaders take away from it? It seems like there's a whole reinvention happening over the last few years because of big data, because of measurement, because of these new sensors that are measuring everything. What do they need to be aware of?
Walmart was the canonical example that was always used, that when really bad storms were coming, their data showed that people purchased more beer and strawberry Pop-Tarts.
This is during a hurricane?
Yeah, or really, a really bad storm coming. So the store manager orders, he doesn't care why this is the case, but that's the inference that Walmart's data was able to show them. But in those days, it required, you had to be Walmart to do it. It's amazingly expensive, computing power. The sensors put on everything were really expensive. And so it was you could do it in these huge closed worlds. And what's happened is it's like, to use the cliche, a Cambrian explosion, right? And distribution of these tools being available, to just about everybody. And so many of the startups that I ever write about are in this world. I mean, the barrier to entry because of cloud computing, for example, and some of these off-the-shelf tools, makes a lot of this kind of examination possible and available to, to startups.
Right. So to a McKesson, once they were the only ones that had this technology
they could,
and innovation.
That's right. And they could, and it was frankly, it was an easy project for them to do. I mean, they had been doing this kind of thing, right? Almost since the outset. These optimization tools at a high end, off mainframes and the things, right, have been around for a long time. But this was an additional $1 billion to take out. So that's,
So did anything surprise you during your research of the book? Was there something that just blew you away that you sort of didn't intuitively know before you started it?
Some of the things that actually surprised me were, not so much surprised, but I thought was significant, was the limits of the technology as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, so much of, it's easy to say we should make everything based on data analysis, right? And gut feel and hunch are out the door, right? But a lot of what we call experience and intuition, at its best, is a human being processing a huge amount of quote-unquote data, but something you can't attach a crisp number to. And that's, a colleague and I years ago did a series for the science section on the front page on artificial intelligence breakthroughs in 2010. It was called Smarter Than You Think. And we, did the leading science kind of everywhere, right? And looked at it. But what you also came away with was a huge appreciation for what we call general human intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Is that because of where we are in the cycle of innovation, meaning there's always that inflection point where, and I know this is a big discussion in AI circles and with cognition, which, it seems pretty dumb, it's getting smarter, and then just all of a sudden there's this exponential leap. What are your thoughts on that and where we really are?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge debate, and as you said, there's been real progress in this area that we call deep learning neural networks in recent years, and they've been really good at surprising improvements at individual tasks: speech recognition, image recognition, language translation. So those have been uncommon gains that people, hadn't expected. But it's still what's called supervised learning that then sort of takes off. I mean, image recognition is a good example. The basis that they test all these things was a tag system of billions of photographs, winnowed down to tens of thousands of categories, called ImageNet. It was developed by Stanford and Princeton. But in the development of it, at one time it had 147,000 people on Mechanical Turk tagging pictures.
Right.
So this extraordinary automated artifact is also required huge amounts of human effort. And the real debate on where we're headed with our artificial intelligence and how soon, which is the main debate, is where we are in this world. How far we're along in moving towards unsupervised learning, because that's when the real takeoff happens. And people, both who are extremely optimistic and extremely pessimistic about, this being an existential threat to humanity if AI takes off, they're all looking at this, how quickly we can move to unsupervised learning. And the fact is that for the people working in the trenches, we're not there anytime soon.
So, Elon Musk is scaring us perhaps a little too soon.
And a lot of this is years out. It's the same way as the automation debate. If you talk about 20 years from now, take your pick, right? In terms of number. I mean, if you talk about the next 4 or 5 years, which is kind of what we can see, it isn't anywhere near as severe. And you see this, frankly, in startups. I mean, I did a recent story on automation and AI in the legal field, right? And it's moving in, but it's moves in, the terms like machine learning and artificial intelligence sound extremely general, like you're going to talk to something like it's not. These are in verticals. What they found is specific kinds of, like, document review, contract review. We've already had, e-discovery in the legal field. But the startups that are doing well are, getting a business and getting revenue from applying these things in fairly kind of narrow tasks within a vertical, like legal or like healthcare.
So that's a good segue to, what trends and technologies are you most interested in, specifically that you think will have the biggest impact on our health or healthcare as an industry but also our personal health. We've been talking about AI. I know you talk a lot about, or write a lot about, Internet of Things, blockchain. There's a lot of big things going on at the same time. What are the implications for health and healthcare?
I mean, they're huge in the long term. I mean, you know this better than I, but health is, it is not only our largest industry, but it's, it's life and death, right? So it's a great, application for these technologies. And the kind of main character I wrote about in this book is a guy named Jeff Hammerbacher, who made this evolution from Wall Street to Facebook to, big data technology tools, and now he's in healthcare, affiliated with Mount Sinai and doing immunotherapy kind of stuff on the side. I mean, as he said, his career is, following the smartest people to the best problems, and healthcare is the best problem, right? I think it's just across the board, they're huge kind of opportunities. I tend to personally kind of look at the science-based ones. Mm-hmm. So people are applying, there's a startup called Deep Genomics, for example, which applies some of this deep learning technology to predicting what the molecular impact of gene variations will be. So what you do is really condense the time for picking your targets, whether it's either for drugs or for therapies, right? I just, the sort of, again, you know better than I, but in terms of all the kind of fitness tracking and the trouble, obviously, with so much of healthcare and from a personal health standpoint, is that the feedback mechanism is not like like the financial markets, where
right.
Right now, I mean, whereas
it's over 30 years.
Yes, you do something now or a lifetime habit, right? And it changes. The effect is years and years and years later. I mean, to be able to do these things, to do this kind of measurement, again, it's becoming affordable in the same way that was whether it's the McKesson's distribution network mm-hmm. or your body. And I think we're moving toward, it moves into even eventually into things like insurance. I mean, you want
right.
to have that third glass of wine
right.
For dinner, that's great.
It'll cost you 3 cents more.
Or you're going to have to hit the gym another time for that, the healthy, for the healthy living discount that you get on your, on your health insurance. I think these things are going to be, tailored, and of course with appropriate safeguards, right?
Well, we're seeing it with auto insurance. Yeah, why wouldn't you see it with health?
That's right. And that was pushed back. Progressive did it, years ago, famously, right? Put a box in and sort of. And now
employers are doing it with exercise and smoking. And
yeah, no, that's right. There's, GE famously has, I think it's a discount if you don't smoke, right?
Right, and
or bonus, excuse me.
It's an interesting point, because I think a lot of the innovation going on, there's technology innovation, but there's also business model innovation, design innovation. You mentioned the wave of talent coming in. What we're most excited about is that last one, all the talent coming in, instead of focusing their data science on ad clicking, it's on precision medicine and things like that. Are you coming across a lot of that in your travels?
Yeah, a fair amount, and even kind of people that I've happened to be in this book. A woman named Yoki Matsuoka, who was MacArthur Fellow, had done a lot at MIT, had been at the University of Washington, Stanford. She was Google X,
right.
And doing robotics. Then she would work for Nest for a while, the smart thermostat stuff. She's doing health now at Apple. I mean,
right.
Because she's at Apple, I can't write about her. I try
right.
to. But I mean, it's like they go in and they don't come out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, across the board, I think you're seeing more. You can debate it, but look at how much of Watson that IBM has done is health.
Is health and healthcare.
2/3 of it's healthcare.
Right.
I mean, and if you look at a company like IBM, they've been hot and cold over the last 20 or 30 years on things like healthcare for just the reasons we mentioned. It's huge, but it's a tough, highly regulated market that's a little bit like small business. In the aggregate, it's enormous, but it's local. It's this. It has these kind of problems. I mean, there are a lot of. Even IBM thinks this is absolutely scalable, because to move the needle for IBM, for example, it's got to be.
Well, it's interesting. They're becoming a healthcare company through Watson.
Yeah.
Tim Cook has said, I think 2 years ago now, Apple's becoming a health company or healthcare company. And to move the needle on a company so big, you kind of have to go into a $3-4 trillion market and make an impact there, right? So I think there's a business opportunity. which is another reason why I think so many great startups are now emerging. So, I wanted to ask you about where we are in the arc of innovation, and are you more excited today or 20 years ago, 25 years ago, however long it's been, when you first started writing about technology innovation? I mean, the last 25 years have been so extraordinary with the rise of the web and everything else that's come, mobile and all of this. Are you just as excited today as at the beginning, or have we leveled off?
I think more so. Innovation, back in the 90s, a lot of it was, in big companies, government funding stuff. I mean, the cost of experimentation has come down so much, so that more people can innovate faster. All these kind of cliches, lean startup and so forth that we know, but they're enabled by technology. I mean, cloud computing, for example, your ability, and the web, the internet, your ability to test things and see how get immediate feedback as to whether it's working, whether it's not. I just think that kind of that accelerated cycle of innovation makes it much more democratic, and in some ways, it's if somebody's writing about it, much more. You always had to pick your shots a little bit, but you really got to decide what you're going to focus on because there's so much.
Right.
I mean, it's because it's sort of everywhere.
Especially with the global innovation going on. It's happening not just in Silicon Valley or Boston, it's happening all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything is bigger in China. I mean, you just put an exponential behind it, right? But I mean, and some of it's just, throwing numbers at things, huge numbers. But some of the things they're doing there are pretty amazing. And it's, as somebody who's a foreign correspondent for decades, lived in that part of the world. I mean, it is, Chinese entrepreneurialism, as long as it's not under the communist boot heel, is pretty amazing. I mean, it is. Chinese entrepreneurs ran every economy in that part of the world, except for South Korea and Japan.
Right.
But every place else, it was this, it was the Chinese entrepreneurs, right? As Singapore was so entrepreneurial, they hived off from Malaysia, right? And that burst of kind of inherent, entrepreneurial risk-taking really takes hold in China. I mean, it's another huge wave, right?
So let's talk a little bit more about data and big data. So is data the new oil? I've heard people talk about this for a while.
Yeah, sure. There's also, there's a lot of water in the ocean too. You can't drink it, right? I mean,
so not all data is created equal. You talk about that.
And people use these overall numbers as to the explosion of information. That more was created in the last year than all the words ever spoken, for example, and so forth. But that the numerator there is really inflated by the data density of images and video, right? And that as opposed to sort of text and stuff. So there's how much you can actually use. Yes, it's extremely important, but you can just get lost in it too. So it's a raw material, to use your oil analogy, that has to be refined. And so that's where these, the machine learning algorithms and pattern matching and stuff, that's where the clever software comes in, because the data alone just is just what it is, right? It would be like the oil that was in the ground at Titusville in Pennsylvania. Before you learned how to make it into kerosene, it was useless.
So it seems like there's a whole generation of people and technologies trying to make it useful. One of those areas is around health and healthcare. What are your thoughts on really the implications? Are we in a paradigm shift with medicine? One of the big companies this quarter that raised, I think, $900 million, a company called Grail. It's a precision oncology company. Yeah, right. There's a lot of people focusing a lot of money on ending cancer as we know it, as an example. Is that going to happen? I mean, is data getting us there? Are analytics platforms getting us there? AI getting us there?
Yeah, I mean, the cancer, there are people who know a lot more about this than I do.
Right.
People have written books and so forth, and this is better than I do. I mean, there various different kinds of cancer. It's targeting. It's it's all these kinds of things. I mean, and in fairness on cancer, nothing is ever. All the money that NIH has ever spent doesn't come anywhere near to the effect of smoking cessation, right? Has had in terms of cancer rates.
Or wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is cancer, but it's it's death, right? But Yeah, I think there's that. There's the high-end stuff that you're talking about, oncology and cancer. I think the other huge shift is what this world changes is the economics and the business model. I mean, people say, oh, the American healthcare system is broken, it's terrible. No, it's not. It responds beautifully to the incentives it's given. Fee for service, more of everything. And because that's the only thing that you could measure was inputs. I mean, the whole movement toward accountable care organizations and the like is that you can measure outputs. And that is what, this is data collection and analysis that allows you to move to this sort of, we want outcomes as opposed to inputs. And healthcare is one example. GE is doing that with jet engines, right? It's everybody, but healthcare is the biggest one that you could actually change the needle on. And, these integrated multi-specialty places that also offer insurers themselves, like Kaiser, like Mayo, like Cleveland Clinic, right? They have their own economy, if you will, built in. And they're doing more of this than anybody else, right? And I think that's the future as well. I mean, it isn't, there's high-end stuff and that's great. And I think you do move toward, routine tests are now genetic. I mean, my daughter and my wife have been checked for things, right? Because you have the gene marker, and it's become, it may not be that it's this, high-end cocktail of stuff that's really expensive, right? It should just be, that's a marker, so let's take a look now. So that preventative health and early detection, goes way down the food chain from where it once was in detection of these cancers. I think huge payoff there. And those are sort of singles instead of home runs, to use the baseball analogy. I think there's, that's how you affect many more people in the long run than the high-end stuff's going to come. It's great. I mean, but it's extremely expensive and it's going to take time.
So what are the biggest challenges with data? Is it literally connecting the data silos? Is it privacy issues?
All of those things, but I mean, one of the things from a practical standpoint, I did a piece on this 3 years ago, I think, for the New York Times, and the New York Times couldn't care less, right, if I did this story. But it used to be in all of technology, IT, that the old bromide was that 80% of your budget goes to just keeping this stuff going, right? Only 20% of the new stuff. And in the data world, we're still kind of grappling with this. 80% of your time is in data janitor work, right? And kind of getting
Cleaning it up
to make it. And then there are this extraction, transformation, right? And so, and there are people wear T-shirts. You are what you ETL, right? And so that's a big roadblock. I mean, we'll get around the automated tools. I mean, the huge amount of investments being made in from startups and established firms, to tackle that problem. But it's certainly it's one of the big kind of gorpy plumbing problems, but it's not, it's not a small one.
So I often think about, these multi-billions of dollars that have been invested in EHRs and these electronic health records. And do you think it's possible or likely that just some new system completely comes and surpasses these legacy systems that aren't connected, that have all these data issues, that have the messy sort of disconnected systems?
Possible, but the way we've always done it in the past is like geology. The new stuff goes on top of the old stuff, so again, you can extract it. I just, so many hospital systems are
tied into it.
Epic or Cerner, right? And you're not, in the same way that underneath here, Wall Street, I mean, underlying transactions are still, the core is still done on mainframes, right? And then everything else is built on top of it. I think what you have is the center of gravity in terms of what you can do moves toward much more sort of online and cloud. But it's, you don't, the legacy still remains. It just won't be where the action is or what you can do with things. I mean, it'll be there because so much of historical data is there, right? But you move toward newer tools.
It's something that, we often talk with our health transformer CEOs about, which is in health and healthcare, you've got to collaborate with the legacy systems and institutions, whereas I know traditionally in technology, often the disruptors completely bypass or go around. In healthcare, it doesn't always work that way. So new collaborations are needed, and really working together is often needed. What other advice or wisdom do you have for startups or entrepreneurs getting started today, and what they should be paying to as it relates to data-ism and technology?
Yeah, look, your advice would be better than mine, but I mean, one thing, you have a neat idea, but do your market research. Whose problem is it going to solve that's going to pay you money? I mean, it's a mundane thing, but I think that's one of the kind of, you started out, you thought it was going to be in pathology. Well, maybe it's something else, right? It's wherever the diagnostic kind of direction takes you, and use these tools. I mean, they can. They're getting much more low cost. They can be extremely valuable, and don't try to build them yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't want to use whatever your comparative advantage is to kind of try to roll your own down some technology gopher hole. I mean, if you're a startup and you're not coming out, you're not a PhD quant, and that's your idea. In the same way in pharma, right? It's why the IP matters. I mean, the molecule is the invention. In most of these things, the molecule, you don't have a single kind of unique invention. You're building on top of something else. So make sure you're, work with what's there that you can take off the shelf and make your layer of comparative advantage.
Great wisdom. So you wrote this about 2 years ago, or it was published about 2 years ago. That's an eternity in terms of data and innovation cycles. What's next? Are you working on a sequel to this? Are you working on any other big projects that people need to know about?
Need to know. So I wouldn't pretend. But what's happening again in the technology world? Things tend to be they move in evolutionary steps. And much of what we're calling artificial intelligence these days is really the here and now, the software application of data science, right? It's a lot of data and machine learning algorithms applied to it, and that's what that's where we're really seeing in decision making things really kind of expanding. And what's really, what's happening in kind of an area to cover is, we're moving from so many, and the drift of, maybe it's too early, but the drift of this book was try to look beyond Silicon Valley. I mean, my view is that, again, sort of, so much the best and the brightest were used to increasing your odds to making a sale. Targeted marketing, targeted ads, personalized marketing, product recommendations, mm-hmm. right? And that's why I followed this Hammerbacher kid, right? I mean, I want to see how is it making a difference in the real world, right? And I think the thing to watch is increasingly it does, and that raises all kinds of issues too. I mean, for most of these kind of the marketing and retailing kinds of things, better on average is plenty good enough.
Right.
And I will quote one of the real data scientists who's a high-end quant who actually is now working for an ad targeting firm, a woman named Claudia Perlich. And she said, look, it's a great time to experiment for what I'm doing. I said, if my algorithm is wrong, what happens? Somebody sees the wrong ad. It's not a false positive for breast cancer, but we're getting into those categories where it's being used for medical diagnosis, hiring, crime prevention, and the like, and lending, right? These are decisions where better on average isn't good enough. You're dealing with individual people, right?
So that people's lives.
And huge effects on their lives, right? Yeah. And their outcomes. So that's a whole kind of, it just gets a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
in how these things are used, and it raises a lot of public policy issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing I'll say is we need more of these great, talented people that you keep writing about and talking about, to stop focusing on just the ad clicking and come over to meaningful innovation.
Yeah, it's the best part.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom. This has been really great. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Unity. Appreciate it. Take care.